Could you make other things? I could teach you my line of work. You know, timepieces and clocks and so on.
One could not tell you, sir. One has never attempted such things.
Well, you will now. Also, you'll spend part of each evening in instruction with me.
And what is the purpose of this instruction?
To teach you, Andrew, to teach you all the things that haven't been programmed into you. Andrew, you're unique.
Okay, let's go. Let's go.
Hello and welcome. Welcome and hello. This is Wait, You Haven't Seen? It's a show about movies, specifically about one of us having never seen a movie before. I'm your host, Travis, a.k.a. TV's Travis. This is episode number 251, and our movie this week is 1999's Bicentennial Man. And joining me to talk about it, it's the Stargate Pioneer. SP, how you doing?
Good. You know, in retrospect, it probably would have been better to have this for episode 200, but 251, that's pretty cool too.
Yeah, no, it'll work. All right. So first thing I want to know is what's your history with Bicentennial Man?
I was trying to remember the first time that I saw the movie. I'm not quite sure I can definitively remember it. It came out in the holiday season in 1999. I don't think I saw it in the theaters at that point. I think I saw it either in a home VHS rental or I bought the DVD or whatever. But our family's history of it is when I had a minivan with a rear entertainment center or system in it. We had several DVDs in there that everybody could agree to, two girls and a boy and everybody. And then, of course, the adults at the front of the van would have to listen to whatever was going on.
Right.
So it was very limited, the amount of actual movies or TV shows that were allowed to be played at any given time if we were all in there. And Bicentennial Man happened to be on that list that everybody could agree to, that we could watch or listen to it. And I've seen it or listened to it many times. I no longer have that minivan, thank goodness, but I still have the DVD. Matter of fact, I don't actually have the DVD in my house because the kids love it so much. One of them has borrowed it. I don't remember which one, and it's not in the house right now.
Nice. So I did not see this in theaters. I hadn't seen it until this week. And it's interesting to me that I hadn't because I'm such a big Robin Williams fan. And I sort of just ate up everything he did. But for whatever reason, this one, when I saw trailers for it, just didn't grab me. And it didn't do well. It sort of hit the box office. I think it was a Christmas Day release, 1999.
I think so.
And it flopped pretty bad. It was a $100 million estimated budget. Grossed worldwide $87 million. So didn't even make back its budget worldwide.
Gross.
Yeah.
Yep.
And it kind of came and went in the theater, and I just sort of went out of sight, out of mind. I would always remember, or if I looked at Robin Williams' filmography, I would see this in the list, but it just never jumped out at me as something to watch. So you brought it up, and I thought, well, this is a perfect opportunity, and I love me some Robin Williams, so let's check it out. It was a lot longer of a movie than I was anticipating. I did no background research on it going into the movie. I knew he played an android. That was it. That was all I knew going in. I didn't know who was in it, who had worked on it, anything like that. So I was very surprised with how long the movie was. It wasn't quite what I expected it to be, but it was still sort of in the line of like other of the mid to late 90s kind of Robin Williams movies, your Patch Adams, Jack, that kind of movie where he is involved in a project that has a message to it. Mrs. Doubtfire was another one which he did, I found out, was the same director. This was Chris Columbus directed this movie. So it was definitely in that sort of vein. And then as I'm watching it, and I seem to remember something about this being based on the Asimov novella, and then seeing that name pop up, I thought, okay, all right, so it's Isaac Asimov. So again, as the opening credits are going, I'm kind of getting an idea maybe of what I'm getting into, but it wasn't exactly what I thought it was going to be. It's a very introspective movie. I won't go so far. I don't think it's a bad movie at all. It certainly deserves better than the box office that it got, and it's been panned a bit. I know critics weren't very kind to it. But some movies just aren't made for critics, right? Like there's just movies that aren't in that line. And this feels like a movie that was meant for a family audience. It's perfect for what you brought up. Like it's that movie that everyone can agree on, right? It's sort of that thing that like the kids are going to want to see and the adults aren't going to hate watching it or hearing it, I guess, if you're driving. And everybody in it is doing a great job. I do think that. I think that most of the performances are pretty good. Some of them are a little flat, but I feel like that's more in the writing than the character work itself, if that makes any sense.
Seems to be the critic response to it, is that the writing was lackluster with this, but it did have, at the time, quite the swath of actors that were acknowledged to the wide majority of people. There were some actors that were currently involved in really big things or coming out of really big things. And yeah, I don't think any of the performances were flat. I think, if anything, the writing was not that great. I do know that, especially if I haven't watched in a while, I laugh and I get misty-eyed at parts in here.
Yeah.
It pulls at the heartstrings in the right places. And as far as Robin Williams, he has some improv in here that is acknowledged in all the documentation that he was in the suit. There was no stand-in, and
Right.
he did all of the improv. I don't think he was mic'd in the suit because that would have been difficult, even at the time, or even today. It would be difficult to be mic'd in the suit without getting, even Iron Man, right? Robert Downey Jr., if he's in the suit, he's got to do voiceover afterwards.
Yeah.
Just because the mic technology just isn't there with the small space to get cinematic quality sound.
Right.
But yeah, it was enjoyable. It's entertaining. Is it the highest quality cinema if you're a film buff? Probably not. In retrospect, I was like, maybe Travis is gonna really like this. So I'm curious, since you never seen it, what your reaction is after reviewing some of the best cinema out there, and being a Robin Williams fan too, throwing that in there.
Yeah. I mean, it's not going on my list of favorite Robin Williams movies, but that's a tough one to crack, right? Because there's stuff like The Fisher King and Good Will Hunting, but also like my favorite is probably The Birdcage. I just love him in that. I also very much like, while it's one that is tough for me to watch, What Dreams May Come is a fantastic movie. It's just when I was out driving with my at the time girlfriend the day that his death was announced on the radio, and we both looked at each other and were like, well, we're going to go home and watch a Robin Williams movie tonight. And so we're driving back home and we're trying to decide what to watch. And What Dreams May Come was one of her favorite movies of all time. And she brought that up and I said, no, because neither one of us wants to cry tonight and we won't make it through that movie. Like we will just be a blubbering mess if we do that. So we ended up watching The Birdcage that night. I'm like, we want to laugh. We want to remember, the clown that was Robin Williams, that character that he could be. But in this movie, I mean, he in this movie is fantastic. He does such a good job of being the android, and like that's not a character that's new at all. Obviously based on the Asimov thing, but also I grew up as a big Star Trek fan, and The Next Generation was the show that I watched a lot. So Data is that android trying to be human. Here's this character of Andrew improving himself, getting to basically fulfill the destiny that Data wants. So that was kind of cool to see. It was kind of neat to see how that played out. I think where the movie was a little bit lackluster for me, the writing was fine, but it wasn't like I feel like there were places where they could have improved on the writing a little bit, and the pacing it dragged here and there. But they're telling a story over 200 years. And that's a lot of story. And what I kept thinking while I was watching it was, from a writing standpoint, this feels like something that works better in a novella or a novel than it does in a film. Because you only have so much time to kind of tell that story. And when you have a book, you have more time to let things breathe. You can bring in and out more characters and give them more time within the pages to kind of do more. And I feel like they wanted to have certain aspects of this that they could have cut. You didn't need, for instance, Little Miss, her son, Lloyd, who becomes the lawyer, kind of doesn't really have anything to do. He's just sort of angry, and we get no idea why he has such a disdain for Andrew, really, other than one throwaway line about something to do with his father. He takes after his father.
There's three people in the movie that have disdain specifically towards Andrew. There's Miss, Little Miss's sister. There's Lloyd, and there's the, I guess, owner of Northam Robotics.
Yeah.
Those three people are all showing disdain towards him, that it's a machine. It's just an appliance.
Yeah.
And that aspect of an android and AI, artificial intelligence, does not really come out in the movie all that much. It is a 1999 movie.
Mm-hmm.
So we don't have the technology today. If you're watching it today, it's not going to hold up because there's like nanobots that's postulated today that really aren't involved in this movie at all. Right. You have much better AI stories like Ada in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D, for instance. But given the time period of 1999 and given the source material, this could be adequately redone. You're going to take away Robin Williams, though, and his performance, which I think makes this movie unique among all of the AI stuff out there. Usually it's more dark and drab, and he's really bringing out the lightheartedness and the comedy of it. I ran into some trivia on this movie that was the first time that I ever heard this, and I'm wanting to get your take on each name that is going to pop up as possible casting for Andrew Martin.
I don't know if you
ran into the same.
I was hoping this was going to come up because this was a conversation I wanted to have. Before we do that, though, real quick, I do want to say I love the fact that it is a story being told about AI, about a robot, about all this kind of stuff, and it does stay lighthearted and very hopeful, and it doesn't go dark. And I kind of had that feeling throughout the movie, like it's never really going to, and I'm glad for that because I've seen AI, artificial intelligence, or I've seen iRobot as one where you got some stuff that potentially goes dark going on. Asimov wrote that just as much as other Blade Runner, that kind of stuff. I don't need that again. I want something different. So that was a nice thing about that. But let's talk about some of the other castings because. Or potentials, because you're right. I do think remaking this today could be very interesting. But Robin Williams is such a singular presence on screen that it would be tough to do something different with that.
All right, so maybe you have a list in front of you, maybe not, but I'm going to go through the list that I've got, and then I want to touch base on what you just talked about again. So first name that pops up, Mel Gibson. Now, this is 1999 Mel Gibson, before the controversies and everything else, but Mel Gibson, kind of a comedic action guy at the time. And this movie would have had a very different feeling with him. Even his comedy is not going to come across the same way in a limited motion android.
It really isn't going to, because his comedy, when he would do any kind of comedy, was much more predicated on sort of a wink at the camera almost, and like a there was something about him. He didn't have the sharp, quick biting wit in his comedy. It's more of a sarcastic type of comedy. Plus, I mean, it's also tough to think of him with the lighter tone when you look at stuff he was doing even before this, pre-controversy, but Braveheart, Payback, Ransom. Those are all movies he would have done right around this time or before this. I think Payback might have been a couple years after this, but like they're dark. Road Warrior. Yeah. He did a lot of very dark, very heavy things. So that would have been a tough one to see, for sure.
Harrison Ford, and the only thing I can think of is C-3PO as Harrison Ford, and that's it's comical just to think about, but I don't think it's going to work. I mean, regarding Henry, is probably about the closest Harrison Ford is going to get to this role.
Yeah. May again though, he's got too dry of a sense of humor. Too like, I don't know, his humor and his presence is not quite the same. It's tough for me to picture him. C-3PO as Harrison Ford, though, I like that. I want to see that movie. I want to see C-3PO as Harrison Ford playing Indiana Jones in a movie. That I would watch just for the jacket.
I was
and the
listening
hat.
to one of your latest episodes, and I was very enheartened to discover that you might be delving into the Indiana Jones movies here shortly with somebody that's never seen them before. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's going to be a lot of fun because those movies are just fun. There's just something adventure about them is great. All right, so Mel Gibson, Harrison Ford, even if Harrison Ford's style fit this a little bit more, I think by this stage, late 90s, he's too old for it. Because he's older than Robin Williams. Robin Williams is what, 48?
48 in this film. Yes, he's playing somebody that's 42 at the end, but he's 48. Yeah. The next name on the list, and there's the list is long here. Mm-hmm. The next name on the list is Michael Keaton, and the one thing that I could think about in him, not Batman, but if he did this, there had to have been a gig about feeding the family chili.
Yes. Now Michael Keaton, I could see do it. Michael Keaton has comedic timing. He has a pretty cool presence. I loved him. I don't remember what year it was exactly, but I know it was mid-90s. Multiplicity is a hilarious movie, and he plays so many different versions and iterations of himself that I feel like he could do that. So Michael Keaton would be one. It's not going to be the same as Robin Williams. You're not going to get the vulnerability that Robin Williams can bring. But I could see Michael Keaton in that kind of a role. Yeah. It's a different movie, but
right. Mm-hmm. The next one on the list is Alec Baldwin, and
at this stage, no. This is before Alec Baldwin stopped taking himself too seriously, or started at least down the road of not taking himself so seriously. But he was still very much in like the I'm Alec Baldwin and I'm going to be a leading man type role guy, as opposed to the Alec Baldwin that will show up in something and play a ridiculous caricature like he did in The Departed, or something like that. So no, I cannot see Alec Baldwin.
It's interesting you said leading man, because I do not think Robin Williams is the leading man in this film. I would have to say the leading man of this film is Sam Neill, and then the leading lady of the film is Embeth when it comes down to it, because there is no leading man. Robin Williams, and I'm not even making a joke or a reference to the fact that he's trying to be human and he's not, but he is playing something that's maybe the lead character, but not the lead man.
Yeah. I mean, that's true, but it is Andrew's story. So
fair,
and like Alec Baldwin to me is too, especially at this stage, is way too self-serious to put himself into that suit and wear that around set. He's either not doing that or he's going to lobby for it to be, because it takes an hour and 14 minutes of this movie before Robin Williams shows up as just himself, that Andrew has gone through all the upgrades. I feel like Alec Baldwin doing this, he's going to try and lobby for that to happen within the first half hour, so that there's so people can see his face, right?
First 10 minutes.
Probably, yeah.
Yeah, none of these guys play The Mandalorian, that's for sure.
No.
Then the next name on the list, which I love him, but again, I don't think he fits the role. Bill Paxton. Now, Bill, game over, man. It's game over. Bill, love him, love all his roles and everything. I just don't see him as the Bicentennial Man.
I don't either. He's great. He can definitely, I mean, he was a hell of an actor. I don't see him in that. No. No. It's a very different movie, but where Michael Keaton, I feel like, has both the acting, the comedy, and there's just, again, it's like it's an it factor. It's a thing that you can't quantify. Like Robin Williams had that. I think Michael Keaton has that. Bill Paxton has it, but in a different way, and it doesn't fit Andrew as a character.
The next name on the list is Jeff Bridges. That's an interesting choice. I can kind of see it. I mean, if you take a look at his character from Tron, the first one, not the second one, which I by the way, I'm watching Tron Legacy pretty soon too, because it's been too long. But I can see him, but I don't know. I'm visioning Robin Williams, and to take me off of Robin Williams for this, it takes a lot, you know?
It does. I will say though, I could see Bridges doing it in the era. I don't know necessarily if late 90s Jeff Bridges is right for that, but Starman era Jeff Bridges is right for that. Because that's that same.
Yes.
That's
Same
right in
character.
there. Tron, Starman, I mean, he could totally do that. So I would, because by this point, late 90s, he was, I think K-Pax came out in 98, if I remember right. And that was the Kevin Spacey is the alien, and he's being interviewed or whatever by Jeff Bridges. And that was the thing I thought of when I saw that movie for the first time. It's like, oh, it's Starman, and he's interviewing Starman. But by the late 90s,
I've not seen that one.
Oh, it's an interesting movie. Because there's a lot of the play of like, is he actually an alien or not? Because it's either therapy or an institution. I don't remember exactly. I haven't seen it since I saw it in the theater, but that, but by this point, Jeff Bridges had gotten kind of into his like almost dude-like persona. So I could see Jeff Bridges doing it, but he needed to be younger.
It's the only thing I think about Jeff Bridges now. Everything's the dude.
Oh, yeah.
The next name on the list is Richard Dreyfuss. And yeah, this is in the era where he was doing, Opus.
Mr. Holland's
Opus.
Yep.
Yeah.
I think Krippendorf's Tribe was around this time too. Was another one he did. Dreyfuss is an interesting one because I think too, a big part of this character of Andrew is a voice that you recognize and that makes sense from a robotic standpoint of like playing that character. Because like that was the thing. Brent Spiner was really good at the voice of Data and how Data sounded. I think Robin Williams in this did such a good job sounding like a robot, which is not an easy thing to do. Like not everybody can do that. That's, I think, part of why I have trouble with like Harrison Ford, Alec Baldwin, even older Jeff Bridges. But I could maybe see Dreyfuss pulling that off. And again, there's a vulnerability that he can portray that I think would go there too. So
the next name on the list, I'm not familiar with any of his work from the time, or at least not off the top of my head. Howie Mandel.
Ooh, Howie Mandel. I would be curious for that. I mean, by this point, let's see, he would have been, he's still doing comedy, but he also had been doing he did the voice work for Bobby's World, was a character that he had created. It's an interesting one because I think Howie Mandel does this. It's a much more juvenile character, but not in like not in a derogatory way. Just like he I feel like would play the character younger. He would have done, was it Real Monsters? I want to say he had done in like the early 90s or something where he played the kid's imaginary friend monster thing. I'm not sure what year that was. But yeah, it would have been a much more like a younger, because Andrew in this starts off, very young, very innocent, right? He's very naive. That's the word I'm looking for, naive. I think Howie Mandel has a lot more naivete in his version of Andrew than Williams does.
The next name on the list is interesting. And by the way, all these were considered by Disney and Chris Columbus. So
Mhm.
this are names that either they reached out to or were on a very short list by Disney at the time. So this is not us just pulling out names here. Next name is Martin Short.
Martin Short. Ooh. There would I want to say it's tough to envision Martin Short playing the character the way that Williams did, but then if you had told me that the guy who played Mork from Ork would play this character, I wouldn't have believed you, because Robin Williams has so much energy and puts so much energy into his performances, and then to play this, which is very stripped down, very subdued. Martin Short's an interesting one. Again, I think there's a vulnerability to Martin Short in a different way from like Dreyfuss, and in a different. He's closer to Robin Williams than I think Richard Dreyfuss is, and I think he's got a little more of a command presence than Howie Mandel. I don't hate that. It's not terrible.
Yeah,
But I
we're
like
getting
Martin
into
Short.
some that are not terrible. There are some that are terrible, and then some are like, hey, that's spot on. So
Mhm.
anyway, the next name is Billy Crystal. And this is in the midst of Billy Crystal doing a lot of theater, right? And when you give the angry Billy Crystal with the excited Billy Crystal, with the funny Billy Crystal, I could see him in the role. Would have been a slightly different movie, but I could see him in it.
I could, yeah. Yeah, he's definitely got the ability to pull this off. Because I think you mentioned how like Andrew isn't sort of a leading man. You need somebody that has a unique sound and a unique look to them, I think, to play this character, because you have to make the suit that they're going to wear look like them a little bit. There's going to be some uncanny valley going on, but like Robin Williams, when you see his face, the way his face is shaped and the way his mouth is, it's very distinct to Robin Williams. And I think somebody like Billy Crystal also has that kind of a look to him where it's not the dashing good looks. That's where, like, again, Alec Baldwin is I'm the leading man, right? He's too pretty to be this role. He doesn't have, he just has too much of that. So I think Billy Crystal's a pretty interesting one. I like that. Those are some good names.
You get two iterations of the suit for the helmet. You get the chunky, functional, and then you get a slimmed down one at the wedding.
Yeah.
And then for the montage of going to find out and walk around the world and stuff like that. And then he comes back and gets his actual face. So you do get two iterations before you get the face. The next name kind of shocked me. The next two names shocked me. The first one was Jack Nicholson.
All right. I love Jack. Jack is great. There is no way I can picture Jack as Andrew, because I just can't. I can't see him. Like, Jack Nicholson is fantastic, and I love stories. There's a great Matt Damon story talking about making The Departed and working with Jack Nicholson on that you should find online. He's telling a story about shooting a particular scene and how he wanted to add stuff to the scene, but he didn't want to add any time or a whole lot of money. So he was just like explaining how you would write the scene and just have it keep going and do 4 or 5 times more than what you need for the scene, and then let it just get edited down. And I thought it was brilliant. Like, Jack is great. I cannot picture him playing this character at all, because all I'm going to see is somebody doing a Jack Nicholson impersonation inside of a suit.
You ever dance with the devil in the pale moonlight?
I'm just picturing him interacting with a Haley Eisenberg in those early scenes in the movie with, hey there, little miss. No.
You want some fries with that? The next name, equally as shocking to me, Robert De Niro.
A lot of the same reason, right? De Niro's great. De Niro's fantastic. He just doesn't fit this character. He just doesn't.
Yeah, I agree. The next name, I'm glad they didn't do it, because I don't know if they would have found a a helmet with a nose big enough, and that was Steve Martin.
Oh. I need to watch that movie again. It's been way too long since I've seen Roxanne. I watched the crap out of Roxanne growing up because we had it on videotape. It was one that I just watched a bunch. I could see him do this. I
could see him from the Father of the Bride standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
Father of the Bride and an even dozen. What was that? The cheaper by the dozen.
Yeah.
But both father figures, and I think those father figure characters could fit well in here.
And he's a lot like Martin Short, where he can go, and Robin Williams too. They can go completely goofy and crazy, but Steve Martin can kind of rein that in. So I could see that. That's a good one. All right. So who's next?
The next two names are interesting that they're back to back, given where they were in 1999. And the first one is Dan Aykroyd.
I saw that one when I glanced over that list, and I saw Dan Aykroyd, and that one I don't see. It's the thing about that is, like, there are times where Dan Aykroyd talks and it sounds like a robot talking. He has a way of doing a very staccato and very, like, sharp delivery of things. There's a few times, as like Ray Stantz, for instance, he'll just, he'll blurt something out and it sounds almost recorded, but I'm just not sure that I could see him as, I think there's the warmth that Robin Williams has is missing from Dan Aykroyd. Maybe that's because I equate him too many times to, like, a character like Ray, or then Grosser in Grosse Point Blank, where he's playing like a hitman.
I think his character, the way he portrayed the Blues Brothers might work.
Yeah, that could. I mean, it's going to be very different. All of them are going to be very different from Robin Williams. That one, he's the kind of quirky comedic actor that I think the least works for me, is probably him.
The next one is Bill Murray, which was back to back with Dan Aykroyd on the list.
Bill Murray, kind of the same thing. He's very funny. He's a very good actor. I just don't feel the same kind of warmth or curiosity from him that I do from, some of these other ones, Dreyfuss and Robin Williams and whatnot.
The next one I don't really see on the list, but maybe given some of his roles, I'm talking about Odin himself, Anthony Hopkins.
I think a younger Anthony Hopkins could have. I think my problem with, and I've said this before, my problem with seeing thinking about Anthony Hopkins in this is that his portrayal of Hannibal Lecter made such an impression on me that it's hard for me to trust him in any movie I see him in now. Even when he's playing the good guy, he can be the hero of your story, and I'm still just like, he is going to turn on you at some point and try to just bite your face off. And it's unfortunate. He's a lovely person, I'm sure. I've never met him, but by all accounts, he's a lovely person. But I just, like, he has that thing where you're just like, I just don't know about you. So
I only saw the one movie of that series, and I'm not watching anything else. He scared me away from it, literally. I mean, really good performance to get it, right? But it's like, no, thank you. The next on the list, I think in 1999, probably would have been too big for the suit, and that's William Shatner.
Oh, no, I can't. I mean, yeah, he would have definitely been too big for the suit, but I can't see Shatner doing it. And I don't think Shatner's a bad actor. I think that he's quite good. It's just, I just don't see him in that role. Kind of along the lines of why I couldn't really see Baldwin doing it. Like, Shatner still hadn't quite come around to be like, I was the dude on Star Trek. Like, he was a little too self-serious. He still can be, but on the whole, I don't think late 90s Shatner works.
I got three more names for you. I know this has been a long list.
No, it's fine.
But I got three more names for you. The first name out of the three, reprising his role, coming back for Escape from San Francisco, it's Kurt Russell.
Kurt Russell intrigues me because he can do a lot, but like I think of something like Soldier, right, where he has almost no lines in the entire movie, but he's got to do all his acting with his face. And here he'd spend a third of the movie with very little facial expressions. However, the eyes would be so blue for that robot, it would be incredible.
And you would have to have Goldie Hawn in the movie somewhere too.
That's true. Yeah, Goldie Hawn's gotta be there. She would play Galatea, right? She would be the other robot that he runs into.
Yeah. So the penultimate name on here, I think, is pretty good for Andrew. Knows how to work tools. He's played in 2 suits in movie series. We're talking about Tim Allen.
I saw that one. And he apparently turned it down because of commitment to Galaxy Quest. It intrigues me. I don't know that I love the idea of Tim Allen, but I don't hate the idea of Tim Allen. He sort of falls in that kind of second tier of like, he could have been interesting. Because I mean, he's very funny.
I can't imagine any other person in Galaxy Quest though, so I'm glad he decided to do that.
Oh no, he's
and the last name that I
Galaxy
saw,
Quest.
yeah, perfect for Galaxy Quest. The last name that I saw on this whole thing, which I think would have been good, but the dude, he can take on any role and it wouldn't matter. It's Tom Hanks.
Yeah,
he's got enough versatility, enough staying power that he could have done this. Still glad we got Robin Williams in the role, but Tom Hanks would have been in the role.
100% agree. I think we're lucky we got Robin Williams. Tom Hanks has that warmth about him that Robin Williams had, right? There's a gentleness to Robin Williams, and there's even when he's kind of getting real intense and real serious, or even which is why when Robin Williams did stuff like 1 Hour Photo, it was such a drastic departure for him to play this dark character. But no, I could totally see Tom Hanks. And that was the other one that I saw a little bit more on, was Tom Hanks with Wolfgang Peterson directing originally, which is also going to be a very different movie from a Chris Columbus movie. I mean, but yeah, I could see Tom Hanks. I absolutely could. And again, the voice, right? I can almost hear Tom Hanks delivering some of those lines. So that would work.
Absolutely. And as far as the director, Chris said in a later interview that this was his attempt to get into sci-fi. He wasn't ready for the role at the time to direct a major sci-fi film, and he regrets doing this. For his part, Robin Williams years later said he regretted doing the movie. There was a final rift between Robin and Disney at the time, after he blamed the studio for poor promotion as the movie's failure, and Disney never came back to him after that. So there were some consequences out of this. But Chris, I think a different director's choice might have given the whole thing difference. But again, we have so many serious AI, android, robotic movies out there. I think the levity that Chris was able to bring to this film made it the unique film that it is. I mean, this is the same director that did Home Alone 2, and there's even a reference to Kate McAllister in the movie. So it's almost the same universe.
In some ways, I don't dislike Chris Columbus as a director, and I think that by the time he did the first of the Harry Potter series, he had even grown a little bit from here, and that was basically the next project he did, was Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. After this, and he had done Mrs. Doubtfire, and he had done the Home Alone movie, so like he knows how to make this kind of a movie. But I think the sci-fi aspect of it and that scope, I think, was something he wasn't prepared for, and that hurt him a little bit. And it's the kind of thing, like, when you see an actor give a performance that's not great, there's a lot of factors that can go into that, right? Did they have enough time to prepare for the role? Were they given, what kind of direction were they given in the role? What's the writing like for it? It's no one part of that. I I don't think Chris Columbus is a bad director. I don't think he was the right director for this project, but I don't think he was the worst choice either, because he does bring a wholesomeness to his projects, and that family-friendly kind of thing that he can do. I just think that, I think that like the sci-fi aspects of it, not being really prepared to kind of do that, that's where the movie's lacking a little bit. The writing can feel a little bit wooden at time. It does feel like there's times where there's like just exposition dumps, right? The scenes are just, it's a lot of tell and not show what Andrew is going through at certain times. There's definitely moments of it, like the montage of him wandering around looking for all of the other androids like him was great, because you just see him out, and there's that moment when he gets to the last one and he sees Galatea at the market, and she grabs the apples and then she flips on the music and starts to dance away. There's so much going on there that's really great, because we're watching Andrew experience that, and we're seeing what goes on with him. And then when he goes inside and he finds out she's just got her personality chip turned on, and you don't have to hear him say how disappointed he is. You can see it. That's where the movie works. I think the pacing of it got a little bit bogged down, and trying to tell so much story, and that was where it kind of it hurt it a little bit, because again, it's 200 years worth of story. That's a lot. That's a lot to fit in, and also the timeline's a little funky to me. Because it goes from 2005 to 2205, right? But Portia is the granddaughter of the young girl at the beginning, so that's like. And I know she got aged, or he did something to help her age slower, right?
Right. It's when he came back from his walkabout and he teamed up with Rupert, what's his last name? Rupert Burns.
Oh, yeah.
They created life extension technologies, basically. In trying to make himself human, he gave all these artificial organs and abilities to either stop or de-age people out to the public.
Yeah.
And also just the general advancement of medicine along the way as well helped as well. So remember in the 90s, we were talking about life expectancies getting longer and longer. It was at the time, it's reduced since then, but it was in the 80s at the time versus the beginning of the century. So when Asimov was putting this together, he just said, okay, we're going to live to be 120, 150 years old in the future. So that's where I took the first 80 years is with Little Miss, and the next 120 years is with Portia. That's kind of the timeline that I was putting together in my head that fit the medical technology available for both.
Yeah, I think where I kind of lost a little bit was maybe it just felt like, okay, maybe Little Miss she just had her son older, and then he had his daughter when he was a little bit older. But I guess extended lifespans could play into that, so that could work. It's just, it's a lot, like, because they don't really get a chance to. They have to kind of move along with stuff to get the story going. So you don't get a lot of great, because there's the moment where he comes up with his designs for the organs. And then when we cut later on, when he's in front of the council, the World Congress or whatever it is, to try and be declared human, like he's talking about how, his designs for artificial organs are in a bunch of the people. And they sort of, it's interesting because you come to realize he's actually very prominent and probably really well known worldwide, but that's never like made a thing in the movie. It never, the scale of the story never gets to there. You know what I mean?
There's a lot of things that aren't, he would be an Elon Musk sort of personality out there, but also it really resonated with me the more I watch this and the older I get, as to you had these personal servants, which very analogous these days to like the Google Home or the Echoes from Amazon that are mobile. It's kind of the same thing. So it's very analogous to that at the time in 2005, but yet we don't see an advancement ever around them. And maybe some of that is the production value of the movie. It was only 100 million. They really didn't have the time or the money to go into those sorts of things. But the inference is that the androids are no more. They're not out there in society, and that these Northam Robotics NDRs and maybe a generation or two, and then they just fell out of favor because everybody's like, well, they're too expensive or they're too human, like nobody wants them. You also don't see anything that's changed in the world. You see some scenes from his walkabout, but you don't see what you would expect to see over 200 years, where you would have major changes in the world, either to natural disaster or major wars or aliens coming. Well, maybe Galatea is a result of that, because she was one of the people on Independence Day that had the signs in
Oh,
LA
that's right.
that got
Yeah.
killed by the aliens. So maybe maybe there's that, but you don't see any of that. All you see is Andrew Martin's journey, and then the world really doesn't change around him. And I would think that the world would be changing around him over 200 years. Arthur C. Clarke made changes in society when he was talking about the 2001 series. And I know Asimov did in like The Foundation and other, but which this is supposed to be in the same universe. So, I mean, if you're watching Foundation over on Apple TV Plus, it is the same universe. It's just hundreds of years beforehand, thousands of years beforehand, really, from where Foundation is.
I think that comes back to what we were saying about Chris Columbus in the sci-fi realm, because in order to do like sci-fi or fantasy, a lot of times what you've got to do is you've got to be able to build a world. I talk a lot about this with people. World building is a big thing for me, immersion into that world. One of the reasons that the John Wick movies work so well for me isn't just that they're fantastic action movies. It's that they've built this world that it exists in, that isn't our world, but it looks like our world. But they've got their rules, they've got their systems in place and all of that are part of this world of John Wick. And I think that, like,
when you're doing your workouts, do you imagine the stairs every single time?
Man, sometimes. I'm still so tired from watching that scene. I was just worn out. But like, that's what makes things like Star Wars work so well, is George Lucas was creating this world, and he really gave it that feeling, especially early on. Those first 3 movies had this feeling to everything about it. It felt lived in. It's what makes the Lord of the Rings movies and those stories work, because Tolkien spent so much time explaining the world and the languages in it and all of that kind of stuff. And this doesn't have that, because you're right. Thinking about it, the world, there's very few changes. Like, we get a couple of establishing shots showing a city in like a flying car, or a more futuristic looking car that the mom is driving at one point in the beginning of the movie, when we've skipped ahead, whatever it is, 10, 15
Did you get
years.
Did you get the trivia on that one?
That it was
It was actually the same
Man
car that was used in Demolition Man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the world itself,
I didn't realize that until I started doing research.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't really recognize it at the time, but I saw that afterwards. But like, just the world itself doesn't feel lived in. That's sort of kind of what I was saying about, like, we never get that scale to the story, right? By the end of it, he's literally standing in front of the World Congress. And the last scene in the movie is the president of the World Congress declaring in a broadcast that Andrew Martin is a human. But it didn't feel at all like that. And I think because we never see anything at scale, so we don't really see the world that is going on in there. And then you're right. You bring up, it's a perfect point of, like, just changes. Things that would have changed in the world. It just feels like our world with a few plastic bits stapled onto it. So I think that's part of what hurt this movie, is a lot of story to cram in. So it makes for a long movie that, I'll be honest, feels long. At 2 hours and 14 minutes or whatever it is, it feels like every bit of that and more.
Unless you're involved emotionally into it, yeah, I could see it being long. The music itself, we haven't even touched on that. Yeah, James Horner was the composer
Hmm.
of this, and of course, he did the Star Trek movies. And there were some bits in there that were directly taken from the music of Star Trek. I don't know legally how that all works, but there were clearly some notes in there that
Oh,
were the same. And then the initial
yeah, Horner does that a lot. James Horner is known for kind of cribbing on his own work, and I did watch a
yeah,
YouTube review of this, and one of the things the person doing that review could not get past was the music in the wedding scene was basically music that was from the Braveheart soundtrack, and this person just could not. They're like, it took me out of everything because all I could hear, all I could think of was the Braveheart song. And that's been a knock on James Horner, but I like his work, so it doesn't bother me when I hear it redone because he's kind of just able to do that. But you're right. I overall liked the music, but you can definitely hear some of the stuff he's done previously in just about everything he does.
because of the Star Trek stuff in there, it actually put me in the mood for sci-fi because of that. But if you hadn't watched like Star Trek 2 or Star Trek 3, you wouldn't get that same feeling ported over. So I could see the loss there. Not everybody has seen all the Star Trek movies, which okay, I get. But from the Braveheart standpoint, that would have been interesting with Mel Gibson. Anyway,
Yeah. No, like this isn't a bad movie by any stretch. It's sort of its IMDb rating is right around like a 6.5 to 7. I think that the critics panned it, which didn't help, and the box office on it wasn't great. But there's nothing objectively bad about it. It's just, if anything, it's kind of and it's funny that it's a movie about an android fulfilling his destiny sort of thing, like that the movie itself feels like it just hasn't quite lived up to what its potential was, if that makes sense. Like, here's this android who's literally outstretching his potential and becoming more than what he started off as, and the movie itself about that is not quite there. Like, it wants to be. It's got ambition, which I think is really cool. It just doesn't quite execute on it, but it doesn't make it bad. It's still hell of a lot of fun to watch. It's got those moments in it, like the funny moments, right, where he's rapid firing jokes for the first time because he's getting to tell jokes. I thought Robin Williams. I thought Sam Neill. Sam Neill's got like a fatherly presence to him, so he was great. This also was kind of old age makeup the movie, because everybody ended up in old age makeup at some point.
I was thinking about that. This is really 25 years ago, and the technology to do the movie is so much different today than it was in
Mm-hmm.
1999. Basically, it was prosthetics back then.
Yeah.
And now you have more advanced prosthetics, you have digital rendering, or you can do them both in concert with each other.
Yep.
And the effects in the background can help as well, and the set designs.
Yeah.
This movie made today would be so much different, even with Robin Williams in it. And I hope somebody does a remake of this, but keeps the same lightheartedness in it,
Yes.
because most of the Asimov stuff is so dark and stuff. I wonder, by the way, he passed away in 1992 at the age of 72. If he would have been like 10 years later in his death, and he was able to be a consultant for this movie in the 97 to 99 time frame, I
Mhm.
wonder how different the movie would have been. A lot of people don't realize when Asimov actually passed away, it was only 1992. And for people that are our age, that's within our lifetimes.
Yeah.
And oftentimes when you're thinking about these iconic sci-fi authors, you're thinking of people that had passed away before we were even born.
Right.
And in this case, he lived in our lifetimes.
That'd be interesting. I do think this is ripe for being remade, reimagined through the lens of today, because also not just visually, which you absolutely could do. You would motion capture a lot of the early stuff, right? And you would do the prosthetics and digital extensions to a lot of that. Same thing with the backgrounds. building that world, that kind of stuff. But also from a narrative standpoint, checking in with and kind of going along those lines of like, well, AI versus artificial intelligence and an android gaining emotions and gaining sentience and gaining humanity would be very interesting today. And if it does ever happen, I'm with you. I want it to keep this same type of tone that it has. Hopeful. That's what it has, is it's hopeful. Instead of the idea that the artificial being gains some sort of sentience and resentment towards people. He never had that resentment to anybody. He was always, Andrew was such a polite, well-meaning person. There was never animosity, except with Galatea. That was another moment that made me laugh out loud when he asks if you've got an impact wrench. And he goes, yeah, over on the shelf. And he just walks off frame, and all you hear is the firing of the impact wrench and her start to scream. That cracked me up. That one, that was incredibly good. But like, it's that hopeful positivity going on throughout this movie that I would love to see done today, because I think it would be really, really cool. But also, yeah, I mean, we've had so many advancements in technology surrounding the visuals and the world and the way the story could be told and sort of the angles that you could look at it from. And like you said, Google Home or your Siris and your Alexas and all that kind of stuff, to kind of integrate those ideas into it and what's changed in the last 20-something years since this movie came out would be fascinating. As long as you can capture the same kind of heart and get somebody, you're not gonna have Robin Williams again. There is not another Robin Williams, but you could find someone that could capture the essence of what he brought to things. And
it's like Aladdin, right? Every
Mm-hmm.
time you watch Aladdin in a different iteration now, it's like the genie is so different. The genie is Robin Williams as the genie was so just iconic. And if you ever get a chance to watch it and you haven't watched any Aladdin and you watch that, you're like, okay, so the genie is Robin Williams. That's it. There's no other genie. And other people kept on coming in to try to reprise the role. And eventually Disney had to bring him back personally to play the role in order to get any traction whatsoever on their sequels.
Yeah.
And it was just the same way. And I kind of think this is almost the same thing, but we are talking about something that's going to be 30 years, apart from the original. And even though this was kind of set in 2005, they did enough of trying to make it timeless that it almost looks like it could play today. So if you're watching this for the first time today, like you did, it's not that much different than it would be today. Sure, there's some sets, like maybe some kitchen stuff that looks dated, but and maybe one of the cars, but you could say it's a retro design.
Sure.
Somebody modified a retro car or something like that. But when it comes down to it, it's been timeless so far. At some point, it's going to be at the point where, okay, a lot of this stuff is looking very dated and it's put in the past time. Matter of fact, you could even take both the card at the beginning and the date that is said at the end, and you could shift the dates in this film. You could make it like 2025 to 2225, and it would be almost the same.
Yeah, which is probably what I would do. I would probably time shift it just a little bit and still take the essence of the story, the story of this android's journey. I do like also the fact that they don't give a concrete reason or inciting incident as to what made Andrew have these feelings. He just sort of does. There's no it's not the Stephen Root character, right? The owner of Northam or whoever he's supposed to be, talks about it being some sort of a mechanical failure, some sort of a problem in the positronic brain. But we don't have there's no short circuit type moment, right? Where it's like he's struck by lightning or there's a power surge in the house or something happens to him. It's just he's brought to the house, and at some point he starts to just have these feelings and have these thoughts and have these curiosities. And I kind of like that it just sort of happens.
And he was given the specific circumstances in which to learn and grow and cultivate this
Hmm.
personality in a robot that's not supposed to have a personality chip. And in his walkabout, it's inferred that there were many more androids that spontaneously developed their own personalities or souls or whatever you want to call it, but they were all reprogrammed or dismantled along the
Yeah.
way. So at the end, after 200 years, the NDR 114, I believe, is the model number. The NDR 114 model, he is the last one standing
Yep.
that has any sort of soul or personality to it, which makes this a dark film when you're talking about Galatea, because she's at the end and she has to unplug Portia, and it was an order. She does not have her own free will. So that makes it a little bit dark at the end. And that's not really explored either. So
No.
you leave on this good hearted Robin Williams, got his determination as being a man, but yet another NDR, the same model, and has lasted the same, and just had her personality chip turned on instead and had been reprogrammed by Rupert. She is nowhere near where um, where Andrew Martin is at the end.
Yeah. No, she has remained the robot that she was throughout all of it, whereas he somehow grew beyond that and then embraced that. And it was helped by, I mean, like you said, he was in the perfect situation, right? Because he gets bought by this family. And I loved the character that Sam Neill plays as Sir, the way that he goes about things, because he starts off the movie talking about, look, Andrew, they give him a name right away, which I thought was really cool. And that immediately sets you up for what type of person he is and what type of people this family is. But like, they give him a name right away, and right after the older daughter, Miss, tries to like mess with him by having him jump out the window, he immediately says, look, Andrew is not a person, right? He is property, but we're going to treat him like a person. And like, that feeds into it. And then he's talking about, look, you're not going to spend all your time doing this and this. You're going to build things. And he gives him a lot of growth and a lot of room to grow, and he helps to foster that. And when Andrew asks him for his freedom, it hurts him because, and at first I was like, I don't know if I like the way that's playing out, but I thought about it more and more, and he really almost kind of looks at Andrew like a son, right? Like one of his own kids, and he's lost, all his kids have moved away. They've all grown up, and now now this is happening with Andrew. So it's like, that made sense to me. But I just loved the Sam Neill character and how just kind of genuine he was. And he always had good intentions in anything he would do. And he was just looking out for Andrew, which was great.
He did have some shortcomings, like he didn't want to talk to Miss about her boyfriend of choice. I mean, so his shortcomings started to come through a little bit there.
Oh, sure.
But it was him, and ironically, he was the cause of Andrew wanting eventually his freedom, and it took Little Miss to point it out to him that no, this wasn't me, this was you, and everything. And then he took, I guess, the night to think about it. It's hard to tell the time between that conversation and the next scene that we see, but he took the night to think about it. It's like, yeah, okay, you're right. Okay, Andrew, you're free. You need to leave this house. Which, as somebody that has had 3 kids graduate from college, and the desire is to get the heck out. And I know 1999 was a different time than the 2020s are, but they come back, even if you don't want them to.
That's true.
So then I get you have to leave. You have to be on your own. You have to make your own life. You can't just depend on me. And society right now, to get on a great tangent, society right now is actually transitioning to multi-generational, where you're getting like people that are middle-aged like us that have kids that might be having kids themselves that are still in the house, and then you're taking care of your parents, which are either in your house or in a facility. So it's a multi-generational, like 3 or 4 generations that are forced to still live together or mutually support each other, which is dramatically different than 25 years ago, where there was that sort of multi-generational family stuff going on back then. But the American iconic family was, you had each generation in their own place, living on their own. And we are transitioned from that to a multi-generational society, I think, just based on economics, if anything else,
Mhm.
today. So it's interesting seeing the shifts of that along the way.
Yeah, and I think too that could be an interesting thing to explore in a remake of this movie is sort of Andrew existing because he is effectively immortal until the very end of the movie when he makes yet another upgrade to make himself degrade. He upgrades by downgrading in a way, but like for him to exist and live through these multi generations with this family and with these people could also be explored a little bit more and how that altered over time. You know, maybe early on you played a lot more like what we were like 20 years ago, and it was more independence within the generations or forced, sometimes almost forced independence, right? Like you're 18, you're paying rent, you're getting out of the house kind of thing. And yeah, I liked that. And then like Sam Neill's character basically telling him you need to deal with the consequences of wanting your freedom, which is get out of the house. But bringing him back right at the end and getting to close that loop and sort of, and Andrew never resenting him for anything that happened either, which is, again, I think what I liked about this movie was Andrew always had this hope for people. He never gave up on people. And I really, really liked it.
Yeah, at Little Miss's deathbed, he comes to a realization that he needs to do something about things because this way of living really sucks. And well, it does. I mean, that's one of the teary-eyed points for me in the movie when I haven't watched in a while is as both deaths actually. And it just hits you in the heart because especially if you're dealing with it from a personal standpoint and going through similar sorts of things, it's like, yeah, well, death sucks. It's part of life. And he moves on and he wants to do something about it, but the death is still there. You just elongate it a little bit. It's very interesting when Sam Neill Sir tells him to get out and he's like, I'll always be close by. He ends up, it's inferred that their community is right next to the beach, right? So he goes down to the beach and he puts this, so this is the Pacific coast, right? And he's right on the Pacific coast.
Yep.
And there's not much height in between the ocean and where his cabin is.
Yeah.
And yeah, the major storms that the North Pacific get or the Central Pacific, San Diego or San Francisco area gets, that cabin's not going to exist there after like 20 years. And just the fact that, you know, first of all, I don't think you can build there if that plot exists. I don't think you could build there. But second of all, I guess he has enough money that he's able to change building codes and to buy the property in order to do that. That's how wealthy he is. He's able to change that
and run the power out there because we only see him plug into the power once, but he's got to have some power at that house.
Yeah, I was thinking about that. I didn't see the roof, but it probably could be solar.
It could be. I did love.
He has
the
no
scene.
need.
Yeah.
He has no need for water. So
yeah, that's true. I loved the scene where they go back. When he asked for the upgrades at Northam, and the guy is like, oh sure, whatever, and he hands him the thing, and he's like, oh, that's what I make in a month. That's my monthly salary. It's more than I make in a year. Like that's when you realize how wealthy he is. And that was actually one of my thoughts at the very beginning of this movie because it's just that establishing shot of the house as the delivery van's driving up, and I'm like, oh, these are some rich people because that's a big house. And again, because the story isn't trying to be dark, that's where we go. Is this affluent area where Andrew's going to be in that kind of an environment, but they're going to be the ones that could afford that as well. So that's how that starts. But no, I do think like, again, I think there's a lot of good bones to this movie. I think that there's great performances, whether it's Robin Williams. We didn't really talk about Oliver Platt as, Rupert. Like Oliver Platt's great. I mentioned how there's a lot of like exposition scenes, right? It's just two people talking. But a couple of those with Oliver Platt, especially the one, and I did capture the reaction audio of it, but when they're sitting there and Oliver Platt's drinking the beer and Andrew starts telling Rupert about, why he wants to, why it would be fascinating to him to become a fully functional person, and he's explaining sex to him, and you just watch, and Rupert is just sitting there like, I want that. Like it's so good the way just Oliver Platt just delivers that, because again, Oliver Platt has that kind of, he can have that vulnerability to him, right, and that sort of childlike almost quality, and the two of them playing off each other was great. I really like that scene. Like there's really good moments in this. It's the kind of thing, if I were going to grade it, it's like it's a C plus B minus type of movie. Like it's good. There's nothing wrong with it. There's nothing bad about it. I just could see places to improve it, to make it a little bit better. But it's not performance-wise, because, again, Robin Williams gets to be Robin Williams throughout the whole thing, and he slowly becomes more and more himself and more kind of what you're expecting out of him. But he never goes too far in that.
No, at the end, he's definitely an old man. He's not dark, but subdued and wistful.
Yep.
And he's just trying. He's experienced so much, and you can just tell that he's very contemplative, I guess would be another term to describe him. And looking back at his life, at humanity, because he studied humanity, and that's where he came up with the idea of freedom. It is valued so much that he wants it, just like he studied sex so much. He wanted to have sex and experience that. It's interesting seeing somebody that has lived 200 years. Like I'm AARP age myself, and I look back on my life going, the way I feel, if I would feel today like I felt like I was 20, it would be one thing, but I feel like I do today, and I'm going to be glad that there's an end to it, because I know it's just going to get worse for me here on in. Just from a health standpoint, everybody goes through it. This is not, I'm not announcing that I'm dying or anything. This is just, regular aging. And I can understand because I didn't get that when I first watched this 25 years ago.
No.
Fast forward to 25 years, I'm like, I get that guy that's standing up in front of the World Congress. I get it. And laying in bed with Portia at the end, I get that guy.
Mm-hmm. Well, because that's another aspect of it that I feel like they could have expanded on a little bit more, is the idea of Andrew being immortal and immortality versus mortality. They do talk about it. At one point, Portia tells him, like, I don't want to live forever. I don't want to keep taking these supplements and keep extending my life. At some point, I'm going to want to stop, because humans are meant to be here for a period of time. And anybody that knows me knows that I'm a fan of Highlander as a series, and the idea of all of that. And that's one of the things that always fascinated me about those stories, is the wrestling with immortality, and the fact that, some of these characters are hundreds, if not thousands of years old, and the things that they've experienced and what they've gone through. And like Andrew going through these kinds of things, but now becoming more and more human as he goes, and understanding humans more, which is why they have that scene, and she tells him how, she, at some point, she is just going to be old and not want to continue on. And his response is like, I can't think of living without you. And that's his first real understanding of what that means. And that's something that I think could be expanded on too, especially an artificial being and sort of artificial intelligence and machine learning expanding and growing, and then learning and integrating emotions and sensations and things that and how to interpret them. I love the scene where he's about to get the central nervous system, and Oliver Platt, Rupert's telling him, look, there's going to be a whole lot more that you're not even thinking about, and sometimes it's going to be too much and overwhelming. Are you sure you want this? Like, that's the kind of stuff that I feel, that's where I feel like the movie could have done more, is in really diving into those kinds of things. They sort of mention it, and then we just cut ahead, and he's okay, and he's integrated it already. We missed that process.
I mean, with Data, you brought up Data before. He had 7 seasons on that show to
Mhm.
evolve as a character, and then several movies afterwards, including the Picard series that just aired a few months ago, about a year ago or so, which was a great finale for that crew, in my opinion, a lot
Mhm.
better than what they had received on the big screen. So I'm glad that they were able to
Yeah.
transition into the realm of streaming from TV to movies to streaming. I'm so glad that they were able to make that last season of Picard to do that. But Data had so much time. You have 2 hours to do this with Andrew to represent
Yeah.
200 years. And even given all that with Data, you only really got, I don't know, 20, 30 years out of it. I don't know the Star Trek timeline that well off the top of my head,
Sure.
but it's definitely more compressed than what you're getting here. And also, again, you're dealing with technology that was in 1999. So they were trying to make it real. In Star Trek, you can say, okay, it's futuristic. This is taken care of. Like
Yep.
positronic brains, central nervous system, all that, fully functional, all
Yep.
that stuff. Okay, it's taken care of. Here, you're trying to explain it with given 1999 technology. I think it would be very different today, especially after you have similar sorts of Asimov related properties like iRobot and Foundation
Yeah.
to go off of. And I guess that's one of the reasons why my mind went to this movie in particular is I did catch up with Foundation. I think I mentioned this before. Caught up with Foundation season 2. I believe they're going to do a season 3.
Mhm.
There is a character in there that is basically an android, and it's very similar to it's the same, like I said before, Asimov. It's all the same universe. It's the same as iRobot and Positronic Man, I believe is what this is based off of.
Yeah.
So it's the same universe. So if you want to see different renditions off of the same vision, there are other works to see. In particular, iRobot wasn't made too far from this, but it was a very different take
Yeah.
on the technology and exactly what you're talking about um, making somebody human. You brought up Blade Runner before. Great analogy. Great. Not necessarily Asimov, but great similar work out there. If you want something to think about with these things, I just think this is a good rendition on the lightheartedness,
Yeah.
the positive thinking, and what could happen if given uh, technology time to wrap themselves around benevolent development.
Yeah. Absolutely. No, and I do think that this is a movie worth sitting down and watching sometime. Some people aren't going to like the slow pace of it. I get that. That's fine. If you don't like the movie, that's your prerogative. I didn't hate the movie. I don't see myself rushing out to watch it again. But if it comes up again, or if somebody says, "Hey, I've never seen this. Do you want to watch it?" I'll watch it with them. I won't actively avoid it at all. So no, this was and I'm glad that I saw it. I'm glad that I got to see this because it was a little bit different performance from Robin Williams, and it did get my brain spinning a little bit and get it kind of just crunching through some stuff and thinking about things like, would this maybe work better in a 6 or 8 episode? Do it as a long movie broken up in a mini series type of thing where you could take a little bit more time with it. And let things breathe. There's a lot of different stuff, but it got me thinking, which is what a movie should do. So this is a good choice for that. So thank you for that.
Yeah, you could make this into a trilogy. You could go through the Sam Neill part of it in the first one, the kind of the walkabout thing with Little Miss in the second one, and the Portia in the third. Yeah, I could see that.
Yeah.
You said you had some audio that you pulled though.
I did. Not a ton, but I got a couple. There were some moments that just made me chuckle, like the moment where Miss calls him up to the bedroom and has him open the window and then jump out the window while the parents are playing chess downstairs. And when he falls out, this exchange was great. And it's not playing. Wow.
Did you hear something?
Is that an earthquake?
Did you hear something? Like, you fell right next to him. That did crack me up.
Yeah, they're so focused on the game.
Yeah. Okay. If I didn't see the beginning where it said based on a novella or a story by Isaac Asimov, the giveaway would have been the first thing that Andrew says to them is, "Do you want to see a presentation about the 3 laws of robotics?" And I'm like, "Oh, yeah, okay." That, I will admit, felt like it was a little shoehorned in there. Like, well, we got to work in the laws of robotics, and then they just never deal with them again.
One time only.
It was a
Don't
one-time
ever do
only
that
thing,
again.
but it does not, like, even thematically throughout the movie, it's never really talked about the laws of robotics again. But I did enjoy that, so I did capture that.
Okay.
So here's the Isaac Asimov's 3 Laws of Robotics, as told by Andrew.
First law of robotics. A robot may not injure a human being, or through inaction cause a human being to come to harm. Second law. A robot must obey all human orders, except where those orders come in conflict with the first law. Third law. A robot must protect itself, so long as doing so does not conflict with the first 2 laws.
I love that. And then I loved Sam Neill's reaction. Sir's reaction is like, "Andrew, never do that again." So that one was
He
pretty
seems
good.
a well-read person. I think he would have read that in the documentation coming from Northern Robotics before he, Northam Robotics, excuse me, before he actually purchased the NDR.
I would think so, yeah. So let's see. This one's just called Lips. Oh, this is
Chicken
another.
lips.
You know this is a Robin Williams like improv. It had to have been at some point. Okay, hold on. My audio is weird. There's going to be a bit of a gap here, but I did like a lot about the way that this one went down, just because this is so Robin Williams.
Chickens do not have lips.
The girl's just like, "The food sucks, but chickens don't have lips." I did. Okay, so you mentioned how there were, like, moments that kind of tug at the heartstrings, right? One of them for me was Sir's realization that Andrew is no longer referring to himself as one. And it didn't hit me the way the scene played out, and he's just saying "I" a bunch. I will look for a place to live. I will be close by, all of that. And then it took Sir saying something where he's just, for him to be like, "Oh yeah, no, you're not referring to yourself as one anymore."
You stopped referring to yourself as one.
Which then, that alone was profound. What the tear-jerking moment was in front of the World Congress at the end, where they're turning him down for his whole thing, and he comes back with,
One is glad to be of service.
Yeah, like a beaten dog. That was impactful when it came back, especially after, it's like an hour and a half later, but after you get that statement from Sam Neill, and then you get him saying that in a very public official place. It's like, oh, you're giving up, man. That just sucks.
And again, that's that thing that Robin Williams could pull off, right? Like, he just had he did it in Patch Adams, he did it in Jack, he did it in Mrs. Doubtfire. Like, all of those movies had that moment where he's just defeated, and this was that moment. And I like that that's not where it ended, that they did give us the last little bit of him finishing out the journey. So yeah, but that was like, there's not a ton of, it's not quippy. There's not like a lot of quippy audio for it. So, but I did capture those couple of things. I thought those were fun. I just, Robin Williams, Oliver Platt were great. Sam Neill was great. It's still, because I saw Get Out not that long ago for the first time. Anytime I see Bradley Whitford, I'm just like, nope, sorry, don't like you. You're a bad dude. Like, so, and granted,
He was great. I think of him mostly from West Wing, right? And
Well,
that's not
yeah.
the only thing he's ever done, but the West Wing was his finest work, and was the finest work with a bunch of the people that were involved in that cast and crew.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and this would have been right before he started that, I think, or right around when he was starting West Wing.
Yeah,
West
West Wing
was
started in
99.
1999.
Yeah.
Yep.
And also, I did like Stephen Root, but I love Stephen Root anytime he shows up in anything. He was Dennis Mansky. He was the I guess owner, I don't know, executive of some type at Northam Robotics, but he's just great. He is one that can play very sinister when he wants to, and it felt almost like they wanted to go that route, but not quite far enough. So he's also just a little bit silly, which he can do very well. I think if you were going to cast him in this and make it today, though, he would have a red swing line stapler on his desk. But, you know.
He was in Office Space. For those that don't, that aren't making the connection there, yes, he would have had a stapler on his on his desk. That whole thing was interesting. I was wondering about it, and after I read up on it, the organization Northam Robotics actually, in Asimov's writing, was called U.S. Robotics,
Yep.
which was before U.S. Robotics became a company. They saw this. They were allowed to see the script and see some early screenings, and they understood that their company was not being shown in a positive light. So they asked for the company to be renamed, and that's why we get Northam Robotics and not US Robotics. But if you're an Asimov fan, you have not seen Bicentennial Man, which I don't know how you could, because usually Asimov fans are watching everything. But in case you have been, yes, US Robotics was supposed to be the company's name, but the actual company asked, don't put us in a bad light, so they renamed it to Northam. There are some, I guess, logos of US Robotics that can still be seen in scenes. I didn't pause and look around, but I guess there are still some that are there.
I read that after the fact, and I'd be curious to kind of look for those, because that kind of stuff's always neat to see. But yeah, I liked how US Robotics named their company because of Asimov, and then they saw this like, could we change the name, guys? could you not make us look this bad? That's fine. No, this is a fun movie. It's long, and it does tug at the heartstrings. It is gonna do that, but I think it's worth seeing. So I'm glad that I got to see it. Thank you for suggesting it and getting me to watch it finally. 24 years later.
It's got John Michael Higgins in it, so if you're a Pitch Perfect fan, that's him. That's your guy. Or if you're watching Game Show Network, you're going to see him. So you might as well see him in 1999.
Right. And then Haley Eisenberg too. She was great as Little Miss at like 7 years old. She was adorable. This is like the second thing she did.
She's been in a lot. And this was one of her, I think, finer roles, basically. But at 7, that's the whole thing about child actors. You should probably do an arc of child actors at some point in time, whether it's Home Alone or this or whatever, because how we treat child actors today, like the Harry Potter trio, how they are treated was very different than those that came in front of them, because of all the issues that have occurred with child actors over there. And not to say that the Harry Potter trio didn't have issues, because they did, and they will admit it. But
sure,
we're getting better at treating young talent in the industry, which is good, because you don't want to ruin somebody's life just because their first 15 years of their lives, their parents are saying, "You will act and make me money," sort of thing.
No, and Haley Eisenberg stopped acting in films around 2011. And she apparently focused on going to school and doing that. So good for her. And I did not know this, but that's Jesse Eisenberg's sister.
Yeah, I didn't know that either. That's pretty cool.
I had no idea. So he took over and just said, "You know what, sis? I'll do the acting now. You can go to college and do your thing."
I got this.
So no, this was great. Thank you so much for bringing this one to me. Now, are you still doing the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. show? I guess would be there's no new
Legends of S.H.I.E.L.D.
Legends of S.H.I.E.L.D.
Legends of S.H.I.E.L.D. We're still covering Marvel stuff. Matter of fact, we just recorded an episode earlier today, looking at the What If season 2 series that just streamed. I wanted to say aired, streamed over the holiday season. And we'll be taking on Echo, which is out now pretty soon. But then, because of the strikes and because of Marvel's slowdown, because they haven't been doing so well lately, it's gonna be a long time in between properties for the rest of the year and into 25 until they ramp back up, basically. But we're supplementing with X-Men Evolutions. We've already covered the X-Men 92 series, and X-Men 97 is supposed to come out later this year too. So yeah, we have a lot of Marvel properties that we talk about. Well, all of the Marvel. We basically everything since Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and Iron Man in 2008, and then some of the stuff that has come before that. We have been covering over on there. I did start a new podcast recently to help a friend who was recovering from a stroke.
Oh.
And that is called Artie's Attic, and it is about the Warehouse 13 series.
Oh, nice.
So another lighthearted sci-fi stuff, but it's what it's her true love, and that didn't change with the stroke, because sometimes personality changes when people have stroke. She almost died twice. Last Christmas Eve, so Christmas Eve 2022, and then she finally got out of the hospital January 8th. And we started podcasting with her on Picard season 3 a few months later, and then continued with the Artie's Attic on the Warehouse 13. So that is a new one for me, and really we're just trying to have fun and allow her a low pressure avenue to try to mend some of those brain passageways, since she doesn't have a positronic brain. And do all of that. I also, in case you're listening or watching this and have a podcast yourself, I also have Better Podcasting, which helps other hobby podcasters make their podcasts better.
Excellent. Definitely check those out. Artie's Attic, Legends of S.H.I.E.L.D., and Better Podcasting. Very, very cool. SP, Thank you so much for being here this week. This is fun. It's good to get you back on the show. We'll definitely do it again sometime. This show...
Looking forward to it.
Yeah, this show I typically record Sunday nights. We shifted things around a little bit this weekend. But the show gets recorded and then comes out as a podcast on Wednesdays, anywhere you get your podcast. So just search for that as Wait You Haven't Seen. Or you can go to tvstravis.com. There are links there for the RSS feed for certain podcatchers. You can find it on YouTube as well. You can also find merchandise on this website and the Patreon for the show, which is at patreon.com/WYHS. And you can join there. There's exclusive stuff for patrons, and there's exclusive stuff for patrons that back the show for as little as $1 an episode. So if you can do that, I appreciate it. If not, if you just want to join or just listening to the show, all of that, I appreciate everything. I love everybody that listens to this, and that's why I do it. I do it because it's fun. So thank you to everybody that does listen, and thank you, SP, for being here this week. Next week, I've got Kit London coming back, and she has never seen War Games, and we're going to watch War Games. And I'm excited because I haven't seen that movie in a long time, and
nice.
I can't wait to go back and watch some baby Matthew Broderick and Ali Sheedy, because they're just babies in this.
They are one of their first movies for both of them. Oh. Man, a little Whopper action in there.
Yep.
That's going to be fun for you.
Cannot wait. So that's what's going to be next week here on Wait You Haven't Seen. Until then, SP, thank you for being here. We'll be back next week with War Games. Until then, just remember to enjoy your movies. And look, just be excellent to each other. All right? This has been Wait You Haven't Seen.